What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And today I want to talk about a little bit of the history, the start of the NF, the Nuestra Familia, and the Mexican Mafia. Now, I know a lot has been written about this, a lot of videos have been done about it, TV shows. It's a very emotional topic, right? A lot of people feel very invested in the information that they got. And I get all that. And this is not going to be an exhaustive history of this is what this dude had for lunch and then he whacked this fool and blah, blah, blah. If you're interested in that kind of thing, then I can make videos on it in the future, I guess. But what I want to look at today and talk about is how these organizations came to be called what we call them today, right? How did the Mexican Mafia come to be called the Mexican Mafia? How did the Nuestra Familia come to be called that? And the use of these family-like terms, right? Canales and hermanos and camaradas and stuff on other levels, but all under that umbrella. So for that to happen, though, for us to have this talk, we do kind of got to start on the same page. So I'm going to go over a little history quickly, and then we'll get into the rest. And hopefully the dog doesn't get carried away. So 1953, right? Tracy opens, DVI, Dual Vocational Institution. And Tracy was a unique prison at the time because it was for YA rejects, right? Those that were becoming an adult in YA and were just too much to handle because of their behavior, right? And also like a level 2 for medium security dudes doing time that were already adults and at other prisons like, Quentin, Folsom, whatever, security level drop, that kind of thing. So it had two purposes. And there was a real debate at the time on was it going to be managed by the youth, Department of Corrections, or the adult? And obviously it fell under the adult. None of this stuff really matters now because hardly nobody, like YA is done and Tracy is closed. So that whole era is over with. But it remained true for a long time. And DVI was one of many gladiator schools over the course of, 40, 50 years. So 53 it opens. 57, 58, a group of around 13 Chicanos, though that number wasn't important at the time, get together and decide, you know what, we're going to set our neighborhood tensions, our neighborhood beefs aside. They weren't all from Southern California. Most of them were from East LA, but you had them from other areas. North-South wasn't a thing. Nobody was talking about that. Nobody cared. It was more urban versus rural than anything else, right? Guys from big city environments with old barrios versus those from more rural environments that weren't such maybe sophisticated gang members and that kind of thing. So anyways, these guys get together and they're loosely known as the Young Assassins, right? You had to be a hitter to be a part of this group. You really had to be with the business. But it wasn't an identity that stretched beyond where you're at right then. It was just kind of like, hey, look, as Raza, we're outnumbered and outmanned in a way. The whites have a little more organization. The blacks have a little more organization. The administration's giving us the business, and they're mostly old, racist white folks from the 50s, right? So you can't really be having these neighborhood issues behind the wall. There's not enough of us, and it just doesn't make sense because we're facing pressure from these outside groups. So that was the basis of them starting, and they did their thing, right? And they were a factor. So 1963, this dude Moose Bazuri and Sleepy Betancourt, both of them 19 years old, both of them young assassins, they wind up taking the wind of a CO over there in Tracy, right? CO Proc. One of them had like an 8.5-inch blade, like a little flat, and the other one had a dipstick from like checking oil in a car, which I kind of thought was a trick. I'll link to the actual appellate case in the description in case you want to go read the details of it. But they yoked this dude bad. They went to court. They got found guilty. So they were sent to San Quentin, right? They were given a boot out of Tracy. They were like gladiator school rejects. Kind of like, hey, look, you're doing big boy stuff now. Now you can go with the big boys. And Quentin was definitely the big boys. That was a very grown man prison where grown stuff happened. So they go there, and around 1964, then they start calling themselves the family, right? And again, it's still not an organized thing, but they're starting to recruit. They're starting to get some older members, right? It's not all just a bunch of kids anymore. And they're a factor on the yard, right? They're not to be messed with by anybody. But they didn't have a history of preying on other raza. They did their own thing. And they would defend raza that were picked on by other races. Like, hey, fool, that's that's the homie, right? Even if they weren't in the family. So, so they were just doing a thing, trying to make prison as enduring as possible for them at the time, right? Now, as they grow, as they recruit, they get bigger, and they again they're a factor, right? Because you had to be with the business to be in the family. 66, they take over the yard in San Quentin, the big yard. So now they're running the show. They're the new sheriffs in town, so to speak, and that's a big deal, right? That's a huge accomplishment, and people take notice, right, for sure. And so around that same time, around 66, they get together. There's a larger group now, and they're like, hey, this whole idea of like, this is just kind of a club thing that we do while we're incarcerated. We might be onto something here. Like this is something a little more serious. This got potential. Like, we're a factor. And that's when they really became a prison gang, right? A prison organization. And still going by the name The Family, right? They hadn't changed that. So now, along with, you know, some rules and some official processes and who gets in, who doesn't, and all this other stuff, they also developed the blood in, blood out part. And the blood in isn't such a big deal at the time because, again, they're hitters. They're whacking folks. They're doing their thing. It's the blood out part that really changes. Because prior to this, for a raza coming in that's from the neighborhood, wherever your neighborhood is, your neighborhood is your brothers. That's your family, right? And this was just like a club. But now what they're saying is, nah, blood in, blood out, that means you don't leave. Like, once you're committed to this, you're a part of this for life. So, yes, you're from your neighborhood still, and they recruited people that were real factors from their neighborhoods and that kind of stuff, of course, to have that influence. But your primary loyalty is to us, is to this new organization that we have, not your neighborhood. We are your brothers now, and you are our brother, right? And the whole carnales thing, like, that's my carnal, that's my carnal. And that was a big, like, kind of psychological shift in terms of prison organizations, prison gangs, in terms of groups with raza, which you had plenty of. You had your leftist political ones, you had your cultura people, you had the various, you know, faith communities and indigenous circles, the brown berets, you know, revolutionary politics was the rage, right? That was popping all over California, with blacks, with natives, even with some whites, with raza. That was just the thing, right? So you had a lot of that influence, and you had these little pockets of Chicanos on the yard, but they set a standard with this, you know, and they created a different element for sure. Now, at that same time, when they take on the big yard, when they take over the big yard in Quentin, that's when they really start kicking their own kids, right? And as I've said before, it's easier to kick your own kid than somebody else's because there's less accountability, right? Who's gonna come to the defense of your kid versus you go kick somebody else's kid? You got a whole group, right? So, not advocating violence, especially towards children, it's an analogy, okay? So they started turning inwards. Like, hey, fool, we can't be stopped. Like, we've got the other races respect now, either respect or fear. Either way, it didn't matter, it worked. We got the guards respect and or fear. What about our own people? So they start bullying their own people, taking advantage of their own people. And there wasn't other raza groups at the time that had done that. You know, that was kind of unique. But again, there's a shift happening, right? Instead of, hey, we're just banded together to back each other's play and we'll help out the next brown man type of thing. You know, if he gets in a bind, you can't just punk brown people because they're brown anymore, right? There's security now, you know, to at home to get these brown dudes. You know, it was a real shift. And they started abusing folks. They started pressing up on folks. They started running the show, right? 68, right? 1960, 45 years ago. Things take a big change. And a lot of us know about the Sioux War and that kind of stuff, so I'm not going to get all into it. But in February, the family killed this dude from LA County, I believe, Sonny Pena, right? So they kill him. And the same day also, this dude, Gilbert Aguilar from Fresno County, gets cut, right? He gets whacked, he didn't die. So when Sonny Pena gets hit, a lot of raza on the yard is upset because that's kind of the first murder of your own type of deal, right? And people are like, this fool's been throwing our weight around. Like, why'd he kill the homie? Then it comes out that fool had burned some family folks at another prison on some dope. Then he burned some people in San Quentin. It caught up to him. So So the family kind of goes to the Chicano population in prison like, hey, this fool had it coming because look what he did, right? That's scandalous shit. That's not convict behavior. And so they kind of let it go, but it left a bad taste. Like, man, these dudes are starting to do too much. But what are you going to do about it? Like, these were the toughest dudes on the yard. You know what I mean? So you can be mad, but you go be mad over there in the corner, right? That was the thought. A couple months go by. March, they kill this dude, Nettie Phillip, right? A lot of people think his last name is Nettie. It's not. That was his first name. So Nettie Phillip gets killed. And that sends another kind of shockwave through the group where folks are like, hey, this ain't kosher, homie, right? This isn't how it goes. And you have some family members, right, and associates who are like, this is not what we signed up for. You know what I mean? We didn't sign up to bully and take advantage of our own people, right? We signed up to be a security force against others and maybe bully and take advantage of others if we can, but not our own, not on this level. Now we're killing Chicanos, right? Like, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. It's the 60s, almost. It's revolutionary. You ain't supposed to be doing that, you know? So there's more tension. And a handful of people break away in a clandestine way, you know, in a very quiet way. So not an obvious, like, hey, fool, I'm gone. Nah, because you ain't going to get whacked. But, I'm going to keep my distance. I'm going to back up a little bit. And so you had kind of two schools of thought within the family. You had these hardliners that was like, this is it. And you had those that were like, it's not really my flavor anymore. And those individuals kind of started recruiting on the under and talking amongst themselves about, hey, what are we going to do about these dudes? And at the same time, after the murder of that dude Phillip, right, Nettie Phillip, Warden Nelson came out on TV and said something to the effect of, the Mexican Mafia here killed another Mexican. That rang bells. The Mexican Mafia, that's kind of a dope name. Like, yeah, that's kind of what we are at this point, right? That fits, you know what I mean? And so they kind of ran with that, and the whole family thing was out the window, right? And now they were the Mexican Mafia, and that's how the M gets their name, right? So this other group doesn't really have a name, but they still like the family name, right? And especially as the M embraces the Mexican Mafia thing, they're like, that's the thing, we don't want to be a mafia, we want to be a family, right? And so they're still playing with that. They don't really have a name, but they have a network, you know? So then fast forward, September 14th, Hector Padilla and Romero, his celly, get blasted. The whole Sioux thing, right? The Sioux got taken, they come out to the yard, knife plate, they get blasted. And pretty much all of this new group of people in San Quentin, right, are like, hey, this is our time, we got to make a play. So 45 years, if I do the math right, 1968, 45 years ago today, right, they react. This new group, this splinter group, what the MA has always called dropouts, to be quite honest, right? This dropout group. Although not everybody there, you know, had been affiliated with the family or with the MA, they get together and they launch a coordinated attack, right? South Block, East Block, the Upper Yard. There's only like 8 MA members, now we'll call them the MA. There's only like 8 Mexican Mafia members on the yard. You know, there's like 30 at San Quentin, the rest of them are locked in a hole. And that was a part of a play of the MA before they were known as that. Is we're savage, we're vicious, and yeah, we're gonna get taken off the yard, we're gonna go to the hole, we're gonna go to the back, but we run the show from back there. So even though there might only be a couple Mexican Mafia members on this yard, if you have issues with one of them, once you go to the hole, now you're in our playground, right? And we run that show. And it worked, right? And it made people hesitant and fearful to challenge what a Mexican Mafia member was doing on the yard, not just because that individual is most likely very much with the business, but, you know, a lot of other people are too. But this was, okay, even if I have a one-up on him, when I get snatched up and put back in the hole or get put in lockup or get transferred somewhere, then I'm going to deal with all his homeboys, right? And that's you know, it's a bigger challenge, you know? So that was part of the fear factor of the MA. But so now, this whole little new group flashes, they react, right? 8 people wind up getting stabbed. The first Emero is killed, right? Archie Gallegos, he gets killed in the attacks. And that historically is why the NF has said September 16th, 1968 is the start of the Nuestra Familia. Now, in reality, it wasn't called the Nuestra Familia, and it wasn't really the start. It was just the first time that this group of people who were dissatisfied with the abuses of the M decided to actually do something, and do something significant, in that they whacked one, right? They attacked them, and they took one's wind. So they kind of planted a flag. And September 16th, Mexican Independence Day, and the whole revolutionary spirit, for propaganda reasons, man, it's beautifully woven together, right? It's not how it is now, but I'll touch on that later. So a lot of these new group individuals get transferred out, and a lot of them wind up at Soledad, right? When they go to Soledad, there's a group in Soledad already called the Blooming Flower, right? The Blooming Flower is like a Chicano rights, anti the man, stand up against the pigs type of group, right? They're more militant. They weren't a prison gang. They weren't even so much a prison organization. It was just a collective of Chicanos that was on that page. They were on that time. Leftist ideology, the whole 9 yards. So, but because of that mindset, they vibed well with this new group of folks who came to Soledad for kicking it off in Quinton. And they also did not like the abuses of the MA, right? The group that we'll now call the MA. So they start toying around with a name. And like, okay, what about the new family, right? Like, we're going to stick to the original script of the family, of what it was. And so they played with that, and the early Constitution was actually written with the Nuestra Familia, right? And then eventually became Nuestra Familia. Within the first couple years, they kind of switched it over, right? So there you have, from then on, you have the Nuestra Familia, and you have the Mexican Mafia. And the Mexican Mafia stuck with words like canales and that kind of stuff because of their family origin, their family roots in terms of their name. And the NF adopted it because that's consistent with how they got down, right? The thing that's this, coming up in the system, obviously much after all of this, a couple of things are interesting. This term canal, right? Oh, that's a canal. When you say that to about or to an NF member, or about or to a Mexican Mafia member, they're not your brother, right? They are brothers internally. They are brothers amongst themselves. But if you are not a brother, you're not relevant. It's an ownership relationship. So it's a term of a relationship, but it's also a term of a status, right? So if you're outside the made mob, right, whether it's the NF or the MA, then that's their status, but they own you, right? If you're a Northerner, you're owned by the NF. Whether you like it or not, if you are, that's how it goes, right? It's a statement of ownership. They decide what a Norteño is or a Northerner is, and what they do, and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And we've seen that since these fools have come out to shoot. The same thing with the MA, right? And their belief, both of them, is we created you. We created the Norteño identity. We created the Sureño identity. Therefore, we dictate anything that falls up under that term, anything that falls up under these numbers, this 13 or this 14. It's all ours. We own it all. But that ownership is for the benefit of the family, right? Whether it's the MA or the NF, not for the benefit of the rest. We, as non-made members, are disposable. All of us. And so it's a misnomer, this idea of oh, that's a canal. It's a term of endearment when we use it in other ways. But really, when you're talking about them, it's, nah, man, that's that guy. And I think it's important, and those of us that have been around know this, but it's an interesting play on language that they still have the foot soldiers. They still have the gente at large calling them brother, but they're not your brother. They're only brothers to each other, and they even do each other dirty. All I can do is look at YouTube. There's a million stories, right? So they're politicking against each other, doing shady stuff to each other all the time. But if you're not an NF member, you cannot challenge an NF member on nothing. What they say is law, right? And if they tell you one thing today, that's the law today. And if they tell you something different tomorrow, that's the law tomorrow. And you can't even accuse them of hypocrisy, even though from a common sense point of view, it is like, oh, fool, you just changed up. There's no changing up because there's no higher authority. There's no accountability. The NF has zero accountability to anybody. Right now, they have accountability to the Mexican Mafia in the state, if we're going to keep it real. But in terms of in the northern umbrella, the NF has no accountability to anybody. They make their own laws. They do their own way. And it's funny because that's the same way the Mexican Mafia is. And both organizations, both started similarly, right? Hey, we're just about this. And then we kind of fell off track and took this, gangster route. Okay, well, we don't want to go off track. We want to stay on this track. And then they wind up going that same gangster route. It's the whole power. It's the whole power thing, man. And power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And it is absolutely true. And this has been made most clear, and the curtains have been pulled back, and the mystique is withdrawn ever since these fools got out of the suit. Now people see. People who used to hear about these guys, and they'd hear about the big homies, and they'd hear about the canals in the back, and this and that. But now they're on the yard, and you see their get down, right? You see that they're punking everybody. If we're going to keep it a buck, they're punking within the brown car. They ain't punking folks outside of that car. They're punking folks within the brown car. They're working hand in hand to do what the inmate was doing 45 years ago, right? They're one and the same. So, again, I'm all for Northerners and Southerners not having issues. Northerners and Southerners coexisting. We were coexisting before these fools got out the shoot up, right? Like on many yards. In Salinas Valley, there was sometimes 9, sometimes 11 Norteños on the yard. There was 200 Southsiders. We had a handball wall, they had a handball wall. We had tables, they had tables. They had holidays, we had holidays. Like, it was a respectful relationship. Not because of fear or anything else, but the dignity of the individual. Like, there's no reason for us to go to war. You do your thing, we'll do ours. If there's misunderstandings, we'll communicate. North and South has been doing that long before this sham little end of hostilities thing. But this is where it has brought us. Where now you have essentially one prison gang, right? Because they operate on one accord. They operate with one mindset. There's no diversity in agenda. Tell me how the NF is on the main line in the state of California operating differently than the Mexican Mafia on the main line in the state of California. They're moving in one accord. They're moving in unison. And they're moving to eliminate the NF, right? Because just on a numbers game, one can't outlast the other. And I've said before, I'm gonna end the spiel here, but if I bring all my homeboys to the table and you bring all your homeboys to the table, but I only got 5 homeboys and you got 20 homeboys, and then now at this table, we all sit and decide what direction do we want to go as a group. Well, guess what? We're going the direction you and your homeboys want to go, right? Because that's how it's going to work. I don't have the numbers, right? And now with some of the rash decisions and short-sighted stuff, under this fake idea of brown pride and brown unity, when it's brown folks getting killed by brown folks in prison, it's brown folks getting taxed by brown folks in prison, it's brown folks getting set up. So that brown unity is not. It's a unity between 2 prison organizations, and it's to the demise of Raza behind the wall. That's what's happening. That's what's been happening. What's going to continue to happen. Yet all the while, these dudes will have you call them brother. It's a scam, Holmes. It's a scam. It's a setup. So anyways, a little bit of interesting history, I think. Like I said, you guys got feedback or whatever, drop it in the comments. Again, I'm all for North and South getting along. I've said before, I'll say it again. I wish the end of hostilities was Northerners and Southerners realizing we don't need these clowns. We've had this shit figured out, and we don't need them. That's not what happened. And it's easy for me to say from the luxury of outside where I have a tree. And I understand that. But I've been there, and just how I feel. So, hey, help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. Don't fall for the oath, girl, man. Bye.